I didn't realize humiliation could be loud until the moment he laughed and said, "You got fat." The words landed in the middle of the cafe like a glass shattering, sharp enough to make conversations pause for half a second before pretending nothing happened. I stood there, frozen, my fingers tightening around the paper cup in my hand as heat crawled up my neck. People were watching without looking, the way strangers do when they don't want to be involved but don't want to miss it either. He leaned back in his chair like he owned the room, like he still owned me, that same smirk I used to mistake for charm curling at the corner of his mouth. "Seriously, Liv," he added, louder this time, making sure the table next to us could hear. "What happened to you?" I swallowed, slow, controlled, like I had practiced this moment 100 times in my head, but still wasn't ready for it in real life. My hand moved without thinking, resting lightly against my stomach, a gesture so small no one noticed. No one except me. I could feel it, the subtle curve beneath my coat, the truth he couldn't see. Not fat, not even close. But I didn't say anything. I had learned that silence could be stronger than any defense, especially with men like him who fed on reactions. "Nothing happened," I said quietly, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. It used to shake around him. It used to break. Not anymore. He scoffed, shaking his head as if I had disappointed him personally. "Yeah, right. You disappear for a few months and come back like this? Let me guess, no one else wanted you, so you thought you'd come back." The words should have hurt more than they did. Maybe they would have, once. Before everything changed. Before that night. A flicker of memory crossed my mind without permission, rain hitting the windshield, the low hum of an engine too expensive for someone like me to even stand near, the quiet presence of a man who didn't raise his voice but didn't need to. I pushed it away before it could take shape. "Not here. Not now. I didn't come back for you," I said, meeting his eyes for the first time. That seemed to irritate him more than anything else, the fact that I wasn't shrinking, wasn't apologizing. He leaned forward, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel personal again. "You think you can do better?" he asked, his tone laced with disbelief. "Look at you." I did look. Not at my reflection, but at him. At the way nothing about him had changed. Same arrogance. Same need to control the narrative. And for the first time, I felt something unexpected. Not fear. Not sadness. Just distance. Like I was already somewhere else, somewhere he couldn't reach. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, a soft vibration against my hip. I ignored it, but the sensation lingered, grounding me, reminding me there was a world beyond this table, beyond him. "I'm not the same person you remember," I said, and this time there was no hesitation. He laughed again, but it sounded thinner now, less certain. "People don't change that much, Olivia." I almost smiled at that, because he was wrong. People didn't change that much. But sometimes, one night was enough to change everything. And sometimes, what you carried after that night changed the rest of your life. My hand pressed a little more firmly against my stomach, just for a second, a secret gesture hidden beneath layers of fabric and composure. He followed the movement, his eyes narrowing slightly, confusion flickering across his face before he dismissed it. He didn't see it. He didn't understand. And he definitely didn't know. Not yet. I left the cafe before he could say anything else, before the weight of that room could press back down on me, before I risked letting his voice crawl under my skin again. The bell above the door chimed softly as I stepped outside, and the cold air hit my face like a reset button I did not know I needed. I exhaled slowly, watching my breath disappear into the late afternoon chill, my heart still beating faster than it should have. It was not because of him. Not anymore. I kept walking, heels clicking against the pavement, each step deliberate, steady, like I was relearning how to move through the world without looking over my shoulder. The city felt louder out here, cars passing, distant sirens, people talking into their phones, all of it blending into a background noise that somehow made everything inside me quieter. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. This time I stopped. For a second, I just stood there, staring at nothing, feeling that small vibration like it carried more weight than it should. Then I pulled it out. No name. No number. Just a message. "Are you safe?" That was all. No punctuation. No explanation. But I knew exactly who it was from. My fingers tightened slightly around the phone, and for a moment, the world around me blurred at the edges. That night came back in fragments, never all at once. Always just enough to remind me it was real. Rain falling so hard it sounded like static. The soft glow of dashboard lights. The way he had not asked questions, had not demanded anything, had simply looked at me like he already knew more than I was willing to say. Sebastian Rossi did not need explanations. He noticed everything, even silence. I typed a response, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Finally, I slipped the phone back into my coat without answering. I was not ready to open that door. Not yet. A black car passed slowly on the street beside me, its windows tinted just enough to reflect the fading light without revealing anything inside. I did not think much of it at first. Cars passed all the time. But this one slowed. Just slightly. Just enough to make something in my chest tighten. I kept walking, resisting the urge to look back, but I could feel it. The presence, the quiet kind that did not announce itself, but made everything else feel less important. The car moved ahead, then stopped at the curb about 20 feet in front of me. The engine did not turn off. It just waited. My steps slowed before I could stop them. I told myself it was nothing. Just a coincidence. Just another car in a city full of them. But then the rear door opened. No rush. No sound beyond the soft click. And suddenly, the air felt different. Not heavier. Not colder. Just controlled. Like everything had shifted into a version of reality where nothing happened by accident. I did not move. I did not turn. I just stood there, my hand instinctively drifting back to my stomach, a protective gesture I still had not fully admitted to myself. The street noise faded, not because it stopped, but because my focus narrowed to a single point behind me. I could feel him before I saw him. That same quiet authority. That same stillness that did not need to prove anything. Olivia, his voice said, low and even, like he had all the time in the world. I closed my eyes for half a second, just enough to steady my breathing before I turned. And when I did, he was already there, standing a few feet away, perfectly composed in a dark coat that looked like it belonged in a different world than mine. His gaze dropped, not to my face, but lower, to where my hand rested. He did not ask. He did not react. But something in his expression shifted, almost imperceptible, like a calculation had just been confirmed. Then his eyes met mine again, and this time, there was no distance left between us. You should not be walking alone, he said quietly. Not a question, not a suggestion, a statement. And somehow, that felt more dangerous than anything my ex had said inside that cafe. I should have said something clever or defiant, something that proved I was still in control of my own life. But the truth was my mind went completely still the second he said my name like that, like it belonged to him in a way I had never agreed to, and yet could not fully deny. I am fine, I said instead, the words coming out softer than I intended, and immediately I hated that he could hear the difference. His gaze did not leave mine, steady and unreadable, the kind of look that did not search for answers because it already expected them. That is not what I asked, he replied, calm, almost patient, but there was something underneath it, something that made it clear he was not used to being dismissed. A car passed behind him, headlights briefly cutting across his face, and for a second I saw it more clearly, the sharp lines, the stillness, the quiet authority that seemed to bend the space around him without effort. This was not a man who raised his voice. This was a man people adjusted themselves around. I crossed my arms without thinking, a small barrier, even though I knew it would not mean anything to someone like him. Why are you here? I asked, and this time my voice held. That seemed to interest him more than anything else. I had said. One corner of his mouth shifted, not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement. You did not answer my message, he said. Not accusing, just stating a fact. I let out a breath I did not realize I was holding. Of course he knew that. Of course he noticed something that small. I did not think I had to. I replied, and even as I said it, I could feel how thin it sounded compared to the weight of his presence. His eyes flicked down again, not lingering, just a glance, but it was enough. Enough to make my pulse pick up. Enough to remind me that this was not just about a message. Not just about a chance encounter. He had already seen what I had been trying to hide from the rest of the world. You should have told me, he said quietly, and this time there was something different in his tone. Not anger. Not even frustration. Something closer to certainty, like the outcome had never been in question, only the timing. My fingers tightened slightly against my sleeves. There is nothing to tell, I said, too quickly, and that was the mistake. I saw it the second it happened, the subtle shift in his expression, the way his focus sharpened just a fraction. He stepped closer, not enough to invade my space, but enough that the distance between us felt intentional, measured. "Olivia," he said again, softer now, and somehow that was worse, because it sounded like a warning and a promise at the same time. "You are not a good liar." Heat rose in my chest, not from fear, not exactly, but from the realization that he was right. I looked away for the first time, breaking eye contact, letting my gaze fall to the pavement between us. The city noise crept back and around the edges, but it felt distant, irrelevant. "You do not know anything about me," I said, but there was no force behind it anymore. Silence stretched for a second, too. Then I felt it, not a touch, not even close, but a shift in the air as he moved slightly, positioning himself just enough that I could not ignore him even if I wanted to. "I know enough," he said, and when I looked back up, his eyes were not cold. They were focused, intent. "I know you. We're alone that night. I know you were not supposed to be. And I know." His gaze dropped again, slower this time, deliberate, before returning to my face. "That you are not alone now." My breath caught, sharp and sudden, and for the first time since he stepped out of that car, something real broke through my control. Not fear, not panic, something deeper. Because the way he said it made it sound less like a discovery and more like a claim. I felt the words settle between us like something solid, something I could not step around no matter how badly I wanted to. He was not guessing. He was not testing a theory. He knew. Or at least, he knew enough to make denial feel pointless. "You do not get to say that," I said, my voice lower now, steadier, even though my heart had started to beat harder against my ribs. Not fast like fear. Slow and heavy, like something waking up. His expression did not change, but there was a shift in his posture, subtle, controlled, like he had expected resistance and welcomed it. "I do not get to say what is true," he asked, almost quietly, and the calm in his tone made it harder to push back. I shook my head, taking a small step backward, needing space even if it was only a few inches. "You do not get to decide anything about my life," I replied, and this time I meant it. The air between us tightened, not hostile, not loud, but charged in a way that made everything else around us feel distant. People walked past on the sidewalk, conversations carried on, a car door slammed somewhere down the street, but none of it reached us. It was just him, just me, and the thing neither of us was saying out loud. His gaze held mine for a long second, then shifted again, slower this time, deliberate, landing exactly where my hand had been resting moments ago. I dropped it immediately, but it was too late. He had already seen enough. "You are right," he said finally, and the agreement caught me off guard more than any argument would have. "I do not decide your life." A small pause followed, just enough to make me think I had won something. Then he continued, his voice still even, still controlled. "But I decide what is mine." The words were not loud. They did not need to be. They landed heavier than anything else he had said. My breath caught, just for a second, and I hated that he could see it. "This is not yours," I said quickly, the words coming out sharper than before, driven by something I could not fully name. Protectiveness. Fear. Maybe both. His eyes lifted back to mine, and for the first time since he stepped out of that car, there was something unmistakable in them. Not anger. Not possession in the way I had heard it before from someone else. This was different. Controlled. Certain. "Then look at me and tell me I am wrong," he said. No pressure. No raised voice. Just an invitation that felt more like a challenge. I opened my mouth, closed it again, because the truth was sitting right there between us, undeniable in a way that had nothing to do with words. That night had not been a mistake, not in the way I had tried to convince myself afterward. It had been quiet, intentional, real in a way that did not fade when the sun came up. And now there was something more, something I could not undo. I looked away again, this time not because I wanted to, but because I could not hold his gaze without feeling like he could see straight through me. "You should go," I said, softer now, the fight draining out of my voice without my permission. "This does not concern you." A small silence followed. Then I heard it, the faint shift of fabric as he adjusted his coat, the subtle movement of someone who never rushed because he never had to. "Everything about you concerns me," he said, and there was no hesitation in it, no room for doubt. My chest tightened at that, not from fear, but from the weight of what it implied. I turned back toward him, ready to push again, to say something that would put distance back between us, but the words never came. Because in that moment, standing there under the fading light, with the city moving around us like we were not even there, I realized something I had not been ready to admit before. He was not here by accident, and he was not leaving because I asked him to. And somehow, without touching me, without raising his voice, without forcing anything at all, he had already changed the direction of my next step. I should have walked away right then, before his words had time to settle into something permanent, before they could take root in a place I had spent months trying to rebuild on my own. But my feet did not move. They stayed exactly where they were, like some part of me had already accepted that leaving was no longer entirely my decision. You do not get to just show up and say things like that, I said, quieter now, but no less firm, even though my pulse had not quite settled since the moment he stepped out of that car. He did not react immediately. He rarely did. That was the unsettling part. Most people filled silence with explanations, with defenses, with noise. Sebastian did not. He let it stretch, let it breathe, until it felt like the only thing that mattered. I do not say anything I am not prepared to stand behind, he replied, his tone level, unshaken, like he was stating a rule rather than offering an opinion. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head, trying to hold on to something solid, something that still belonged to me. This is my life, I said. You were one night. That is all. The words hung in the air between us, sharp enough to cut if they had been aimed at anyone else. But he did not flinch. He did not even blink. If anything, something in his expression softened, not in weakness, but in recognition, like he had expected me to say exactly that. If that is what you need to tell yourself, he said quietly, and somehow that was worse than if he had argued. I felt something twist in my chest at that, frustration rising in a way I could not fully control. It is not something I need to tell myself. I pushed back. It is the truth. He took a single step closer, closing the distance just enough that I could feel the shift in the air again, that subtle change that made everything else feel less important. Not overwhelming, not threatening, just certain. Then why did you not answer me? He asked. No accusation, no pressure, just a question that landed heavier than it should have. I opened my mouth, then stopped, because I did not have a simple answer. Because answering him would mean admitting that I had thought about him more than I should have, that I had replayed that night in my mind, not with regret, but with questions I did not know how to ask out loud. Because I do not owe you anything, I said finally, and this time there was less certainty behind it than I wanted. His gaze held mine, steady, patient, like he was giving me space to hear my own words and decide if I believed them. You are right, he said again, and there was no hesitation in it. You do not owe me anything. A small pause followed, just enough to let that sink in. Then his voice lowered, not in volume, but in tone, something deeper threading through it. But that does not change what is coming. My breath caught slightly at that, not from fear, but from the weight of it, the inevitability in the way he said it. What is that supposed to mean? I asked, my voice quieter now, the fight shifting into something more cautious, more aware. He did not answer right away. Instead, his eyes moved again, slower this time, resting on my stomach with a focus that felt almost protective rather than possessive, and that difference unsettled me more than anything else. When he looked back at me, there was no doubt left in his expression. It means you are not doing this alone, he said. I shook my head immediately, instinctively. I already am, I replied. I have been. Something in his gaze changed at that, not sharp, not cold, but resolved, like a decision had just been finalized. Not anymore, he said simply. No force, no demand, just certainty. And for the first time since all of this began, I realized something that made my chest tighten in a completely different way. He was not asking for permission. And somehow, despite everything I had told myself, a part of me was no longer sure I wanted him to. I did not realize how quiet the street had become until I heard my own breathing again, slow and uneven, like my body was trying to catch up with a conversation my mind had not fully processed yet. Not anymore. The words stayed with me, echoing in a way that felt less like a statement and more like a shift I could not reverse. You do not get to decide that, I said, but there was something different in my voice now, less resistance, more awareness, like I was starting to understand that pushing him away was not as simple as it used to be with other people. He studied me for a moment, not in a way that felt invasive, but in a way that felt precise, like he was reading something written between my words rather than the words themselves. You keep saying that, he replied calmly, but you have not walked away. That hit harder than anything else. Because he was right. I could have left. I could have turned, kept walking, disappeared into the city like I had done before. But I had not. And we both knew it. I exhaled, looking past him for a second, at the movement of cars, at the reflection of streetlights on glass windows, anything to ground myself in something normal. This does not change anything, I said, quieter now. I have my own life. I have a plan. Saying it out loud felt necessary, like a reminder to myself as much as it was a statement to him. His expression did not shift, but there was a subtle narrowing of his focus, like the word plan had caught his attention in a way I did not expect. Then tell me your plan, he said. No challenge. No sarcasm. Just a direct request that left no room to hide behind vague answers. I hesitated, because my plan had always been simple. Stay quiet. Stay out of reach. Handle everything on my own. It had worked so far. At least, that was what I had been telling myself. I am fine, I said instead, deflecting, and immediately I knew that was not going to be enough. His gaze held steady, patient, but unyielding. That is not a plan, he replied. That is avoidance. A small spark of frustration flared in my chest. You do not know what I am dealing with. I pushed back. You do not know what it takes to keep things together when you do not have people like you watching your back. The moment the words left my mouth, I realized what I had said. Because he did not react with offense. He did not argue. He simply absorbed it like he was already deciding what to do with that information. You are right, he said after a second. I do not know how you have been doing it. A pause followed, brief but deliberate. But I know you should not have to. That was new. That was not control. Not ownership in the way I expected. It was something else. Something quieter. And somehow, that unsettled me more than if he had tried to take over the situation completely. I shook my head, trying to hold on to the version of reality I had built for myself. I do not need help, I said, even though the words felt less solid than they used to. His gaze softened just slightly, not enough to lose its edge, but enough to make it clear he was choosing his next words carefully. That is not the same as saying you do not deserve it, he said. My chest tightened at that, a reaction I could not fully explain, because he was not wrong. And that made it harder to argue. A silence stretched between us, not uncomfortable, but heavy with everything neither of us was saying. Then he glanced toward the car behind him, a small, almost unnoticeable movement, but it shifted the moment. You are not staying here, he said, turning his attention back to me. Not a question, not even a suggestion, a decision already made. I let out a small, incredulous breath. And where exactly do you think I am going? I asked, crossing my arms again, trying to rebuild some kind of distance. His answer came without hesitation. Somewhere you do not have to look over your shoulder, he said. I almost laughed at that, but it did not come out. Because the truth was, I had been doing exactly that for longer than I wanted to admit. And the way he said it made it sound like he had already decided I would not have to anymore. I should have said no immediately, something firm, something final that would put space back between us and remind both of us where the line was supposed to be. But the truth sat heavier than my pride, because a part of me understood exactly what he meant when he said I would not have to look over my shoulder anymore. I had been doing that without even realizing it, checking reflections in windows, listening for footsteps that matched mine a little too closely, measuring every space I entered as if it could turn against me at any second. You are assuming I need that, I said, but the words lacked the edge they once had, like even I could hear the difference. He did not argue. He did not push. He simply held my gaze, steady and certain, as if waiting for me to catch up to something he had already accepted. I do not assume, he replied quietly. I observe. That word lingered, heavier than it should have been, because it meant he had been paying attention long before this moment, noticing things I thought I had hidden well enough to disappear into the background of my own life. And what exactly have you observed? I asked, crossing my arms tighter, not to block him, but to hold myself together. His answer came without hesitation. You scan every exit when you enter a place, he said. You do not sit with your back to the room. You keep your phone within reach at all times. And when someone raises their voice, even slightly, your shoulders tense before you can stop it. My breath caught, subtle but undeniable, because he was not guessing. He was describing patterns I had never said out loud, patterns I had barely admitted to myself. I looked away, jaw tightening as I tried to regain control over a conversation that no longer felt like it belonged to me. That does not mean I cannot handle myself, I said, quieter now, more defensive than I wanted. It means you have been handling everything alone for too long, he replied, and there was no judgment in it, only a calm certainty that made it harder to reject. A car passed behind him, the low hum of the engine briefly filling the silence, and I focused on that sound for a second, anything to ground myself in something that was not him, not this conversation that kept shifting further out of my control. And what? I asked slowly, forcing my voice to steady. You think you can just step in and fix that? His expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened, not in aggression, but in intent. I do not fix things that are not broken, he said. I protect what matters. The words landed differently this time, not like a claim, not like possession, but like a boundary drawn in a place I had not realized was exposed. My hand moved again, instinctively, resting against my stomach for just a second before I could stop it, and I saw the way his gaze followed the movement, not with surprise, not with question, but with something steadier, something resolved. You keep doing that, he said quietly. I froze slightly, my hand dropping back to my side, my pulse picking up again. Doing what? I asked, even though I already knew. His voice lowered just enough to make the moment feel more contained, more focused. Protecting something you have not acknowledged out loud, he said. My throat tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of hearing it spoken in a way I could not deflect. You do not get to define that, I said, but the words felt thinner now, less certain. He took a small step closer, not closing the distance completely, just enough to make it clear he was not stepping back either. I am not defining it, he replied. I am recognizing it. Silence followed, heavier this time, filled with everything I had been avoiding, everything I had pushed aside in the hope that ignoring it would make it less real. It did not. It never had. You can keep pretending this is something you can manage on your own, he continued, his tone still calm, still controlled. But that does not make it true. I looked at him then, really looked, searching for something I could push against, something that would make it easier to walk away, but all I found was certainty. Not force, not pressure, just a man who had already decided where he stood. And somehow, that made the next choice feel heavier than anything that had come before. The silence between us stretched longer this time, not because there was nothing left to say, but because everything that mattered had already been placed on the table, waiting for me to decide whether I was going to keep pretending it did not exist. I could feel it in the way my chest rose and fell, slower now, heavier, like each breath carried more weight than the last. You talk like everything is already decided, I said finally, my voice quieter, not weak, but measured, like I was choosing each word, more carefully than before. He did not look away. He never did. Some things are, he replied, and there was no arrogance in it. No need to prove anything, just a calm certainty that made it harder to argue against. I shook my head slightly, a small movement, but enough to remind myself that I still had a choice, that I was not someone who let other people write the direction of my life. You do not know what I want, I said. You do not know what I am planning to do. His gaze softened just a fraction, not enough to lose its intensity, but enough to shift the tone of the moment. Then tell me, he said. Tell me what you want, Olivia. The question should have been simple. It should have been easy to answer. But the truth sat somewhere deeper than words, tangled in everything I had been trying to manage on my own. I wanted control. I wanted stability. I wanted a future that did not depend on anyone else. But standing here, with him watching me like he could see past every surface answer, I realized something I had not been ready to admit. Those things were not as separate as I had convinced myself they were. I want to handle this myself, I said, and even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were incomplete. His eyes held mine, steady, waiting, like he understood there was more I was not saying. And, he prompted, not pushing, just giving space. I hesitated, my fingers curling slightly at my sides as I searched for something that felt honest enough to say out loud. And I do not want to lose myself in someone else's world, I added, quieter now. That was the truth I had been holding on to. The line I had drawn long before he ever stepped into my life. Something in his expression shifted again, not defensive, not dismissive, but thoughtful, like he was weighing my words instead of rejecting them. Then do not, he said. The simplicity of that answer caught me off guard. I blinked, searching his face for something more, something that made sense of it. It is not that simple, I said. People like you do not just exist in the background. Everything changes. He took a small breath, barely noticeable, but it grounded the moment in a way that made it feel more real, less like a confrontation and more like something else entirely. You are right, he said. Everything changes. A brief pause followed. Then his voice lowered slightly, not in volume, but in tone, like he was choosing to be more precise. But that does not mean you disappear. The words settled into me in a way I was not prepared for, because they challenged something I had assumed was inevitable. That being near someone like him meant losing the version of myself I had fought to build. I looked at him more closely then, not just seeing the control, the presence, the quiet authority, but something else beneath it. Something steady. Something that did not feel like it needed to take anything from me to exist. You really think it works like that? I asked, my voice softer now, less guarded. He did not hesitate. I do not think, he said. I decide. There it was again. That certainty. That refusal to leave things undefined. And yet, it did not feel like he was deciding for me. It felt like he was deciding where he stood, and leaving the rest open for me to meet him there, or walk away. My heart beat a little faster at that realization, not from fear, but from the weight of the choice in front of me. I glanced toward the car behind him, then back at him, the space between those 2 points suddenly feeling like more than just a few steps. And if I say no? I asked, needing to hear it, needing to know where the line actually was. His expression did not change, but his answer came without hesitation. Then I make sure you are safe anyway, he said. No argument. No negotiation. Just a line drawn in a place I had not expected. And for the first time, I realized this was not about control. It was about something far more dangerous. Something that did not need permission to exist. I did not expect that answer to steady me. But it did, not in a way that erased the tension between us, but in a way that made it feel clearer, sharper, like the world had narrowed down to a single decision I could no longer avoid. You cannot protect someone who does not ask for it, I said, my voice quieter. Now, not challenging, but searching for something solid to hold on to. He did not move. Not closer. Not away. Just enough presence to make it clear he was exactly where he intended to be. I can, he replied simply. The question is whether you are going to let me do it with you or without you. The words settled deeper than anything else he had said, not because they were forceful, but because they were honest in a way I could not twist or ignore. I looked at him for a long second, really looked this time, past the control, past the certainty, trying to understand what kind of man said something like that and meant it without hesitation. Most people made promises to be believed. He made statements because he already knew what he would do. My hand moved again, slower this time, resting against my stomach, not hidden, not rushed, just there. A quiet acknowledgement I had been avoiding. His gaze followed, but there was no surprise in it, no question, just a steady awareness that had been there from the beginning. You said you decide, I said softly. So what exactly have you decided? He did not answer immediately. For the first time, there was a pause that felt deliberate, like he was choosing how much to say, not because he lacked certainty, but because he understood the weight of it. Then his eyes lifted back to mine, and whatever distance had been left between us disappeared completely. I decided the moment you walked away that night, he said, his voice low and even, that if you ever needed me, you would not have to ask. My breath caught, not sharply, not suddenly, but enough to make the moment feel heavier, more real. Because that was not something you said lightly. That was not something you said unless you meant it long before this conversation ever happened. And now? I asked, barely above a whisper. He stepped closer then, not enough to overwhelm, just enough to make the space between us feel intentional, like every inch had been measured. Now I know you need me, he said. I should have argued. I should have pushed back, told him he was wrong, told him I had everything under control, that I did not need anyone stepping into my life and rewriting the rules I had spent months trying to follow. But the truth sat too close to the surface now. I had been managing, surviving, holding everything together one careful decision at a time. But that was not the same as being safe. And deep down, I knew it. You are asking me to trust you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. His expression did not shift, but something in his eyes softened just enough to change the tone of the moment. "No," he replied. "I am giving you a reason to." That landed differently. Not a demand, not a request, an offer. And somehow, that made it harder to refuse. I let out a slow breath, my gaze dropping for a second before lifting back to meet his. The city moved around us again, cars passing, voices blending into the background, but it all felt distant, like none of it mattered compared to what was standing in front of me. "If I step into your world," I said carefully, "there is no halfway, is there?" He did not hesitate. "No," he said. There it was. No illusion. No softening of what this meant. Just truth. And yet, there was no pressure behind it. No urgency. Just a man who had already decided where he stood, waiting to see if I would meet him there. My heart beat slower now, not because the situation had become easier, but because I had finally stopped pretending I could avoid it. I looked at the car behind him, then back at him, the distance between those two choices no longer unclear. Then I took a step forward. Just one. Small. Measured. But enough. Enough to change everything. He did not reach for me. He did not need to. Because the moment I moved, something shifted in the air, something quiet but undeniable. And for the first time, I realized the truth I had been circling around since the beginning. He did not raise his voice. He did not force my hand. He did not take control away from me. But somehow he made it impossible for me to choose anything else.